Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 95 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we've got my 2026 running back rankings for the upcoming NFL draft. So we've got 14 rookie running backs that I want to discuss on today's show. We got all kinds of stats and numbers for you about these guys. And we'll talk about the class as a whole, where you should be targeting some of these players in your rookie drafts, and just dive into the class as much as we can. So before we do that, as always, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure that you follow this show, like it, subscribe, whatever the button is on your preferred podcast platform. Make sure that you subscribe, like, or follow so you don't miss any future shows. And if you feel so inclined, 5-star reviews are very helpful to the show, so we very much appreciate that. And want to remind everyone as well to go follow us on social media. So we are on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. We have a Facebook page, and like I mentioned, the YouTube channel at Dynasty War Room as well. You can find me on those platforms, Twitter especially, at Andrew V. Court. So go follow along. I'm happy to interact, answer any questions you have as we get into rookie draft season. So with all that out of the way, I want to dive into this running back class, which, to be frank, is not very good. This running back class is one that I am not excited about in any way, shape, or form outside of the number one player. It is the first time that I can remember ever having a situation where I am completely skipping a tier. I do not have a single running back in tier 2 in this class. It's, Jeremiyah Love at the top, who we'll talk about, and then a list of names that could go in any which order. So we're going to discuss all of those guys, but I think one overarching theme here is going to be that draft capital for these players, as it usually is for running backs, but even more so than normal, is really going to give us some clarity on where these guys belong, because there are players that, on paper seem fine enough, but they're projected to be 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks. There are guys that on paper don't seem like 2nd or 3rd round picks that could go on day 2. So we'll just have to evaluate that and really let the NFL tell us what they think about a lot of these guys when it comes to helping finalize tiers and who the RB2 in this class really is. Because I have to put someone at RB2, but I don't really love anyone enough to confidently say, this guy's my second favorite running back in this class or anything like that. I think there are 3 names that you could put there, but again, draft capital is going to tell us a lot. And so we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we get there. But let's spend some time on Jeremiyah Love, the number 1 running back in this class, the one player that is worth the hype and is projected to be the first overall pick in every single rookie draft, regardless of your format, whether it's Superflex, single QB, etc. Jeremiyah Love should be the 101 in your league, especially we're assuming that he goes in the top 10 of the NFL draft. But even if he were to go somewhere in the teens, I still think this is the number 1 overall pick in rookie drafts. And so Jeremiyah Love out of Notre Dame, he is, as of April 12th, 20.8 years old. He is 6 foot, 212 pounds. Last year at Notre Dame, 199 carries for 1,372 yards, 18 touchdowns. He also caught 27 passes for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. And PFF gave him a 93.1 grade, and he is widely considered across the board. There's not going to be a single draft analyst, fantasy analyst, anything out there that tries to tell you any other running back is at the top. So Love is that guy. And, he does everything. He is somebody that I think is pretty close in tier as a prospect to Ashton Genty last year. It's tough to figure out who would necessarily be first of those two. I lean Genty, but it's extremely close. I do think that Love just has everything that you want from a prospect in terms of 3-down workload. He can catch the ball. He's explosive. He can break off long runs. Obviously had a lot of touchdowns in college, played at a top program, And, there's not really anything to nitpick with Love. He is going to be less than 21 years old on draft night. And so he's going to have a long runway for Dynasty success. So he's locked in at the 101. Again, there's not a ton to say about him because he's just very, very good across the board. There's going to be marginal little things that he could get better at, pass protection, things like that. But in terms of when the ball is in his hands, he's electric. He does what you want, and he is somebody that I will absolutely be taking over Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Fernando Mendoza, whoever ends up being, in that 2, 3, 4 of your rookie drafts. Love is safely worth the 101, and I think he's worth a good bit more than the 102. So this is not a player that I would just necessarily be looking to trade away. If you're going to move off of Love in your league, because given that you have the 101, probably in a deep rebuild, you should be leveraging this pick to get a pretty monster return. I'm talking multiple 2027 firsts with a, starting level caliber player to go along with it. If you wanted to drop to the 102, 103, I would be looking to add a 2027 mid or high first round pick with that. Something along those lines. This should not be a cheap player, given that he is the only running back in this class that I really think is going to be locked into a starting job right away. So, that just increases his value even more because, of course, every single year, everyone needs a running back. And, typically you can get one of those guys late first, early second, mid second. There's always a name. But this year, the names that are going in those ranges are simply not to the same level as years past. So Jeremiyah Love will probably be locked in as a top 6 dynasty running back right off the rip. I think you could debate where he is exactly, but I would imagine that he is somewhere in the Devon Achane, Amarian Hampton, Ashton Genty tier. So he'll be in that grouping. And, lots of good landing spots in the class. I think Washington would be a great fit at 7th overall. Lots of talk about Tennessee at 4, New York Giants at 5, which I think would be kind of a bummer, but certainly in the mix. So Jeremiyah Love out of Notre Dame at the number 1 spot. At number 2, I'm going to go with Jonah Coleman, running back out of Washington, projected to be a 3rd-round pick at the moment, late 3rd. 22.4 years old, 5'8", 220 pounds, 82.1 PFF grade. Last year at Washington, 156 carries, 758 yards, and 15 touchdowns, 31 catches for 354 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Jonah Coleman in the 2 spot, again, there's a few names that could go here. To me, Coleman is a true 3-down running back. He did that in college. He did it for multiple years. He is someone that is a good pass catcher, and he's got the size to play as a power back. So I like what I've seen from Jonah Coleman, although the big worry, of course, is draft capital, because right at that 3-4 turn area in the NFL draft is a big deal. You really hope that he ends up in the top 100, that he can go on day 2 in that 3rd round. If he falls to the 4th, he will almost certainly fall down these rankings a few spots. So that's something to keep an eye on, because I do think a lot of these guys in this range are in that 3rd, 4th area of the draft. We don't know exactly how the NFL is going to view these guys, but landing on day 2 is a big deal compared to the guys going on day 3 into the 4th round. And then, of course, if anyone can sneak into the 2nd round of this draft, that will be a huge bump to them. I would imagine that if any running back goes in the 2nd round, they will probably bump up to my number 2 spot in my rankings. I think right now, Jadarian Price, the other Notre Dame running back, is the one guy that is being talked about as a 2nd round pick. So he is the one that I do not have at number 2 right now, but I could see him bumping up to that spot with what the NFL tells us at the draft. So Jonah Coleman in the number 2 spot. He is somebody that my big worry, besides draft capital, is his speed. He didn't test at the combine or pro day. I think it's something where, given his size, it's fair to assume he might have run something like a 4.6, which is not great. Maybe 4.5 best case scenario. So otherwise, I think he would have ran, right? Because if you're running a 4.4, you're going to be running at the combine or your pro day. You're not going to be sitting out. So to me, that signals maybe not the best athlete, which is a bit of a bummer because he does have the good production. I think he's one of the only guys in this class that can be a true three-down NFL player. And so if he can go in the third round, I will be interested in Jonah Coleman. He's probably the RB2 in this class will probably go at the very back of the first round in most leagues, unless he gets steamed, Price or Coleman or whoever gets steamed up all the way to early second. Then they could end up more in the 108, 109, 110 type of range. But right now, I don't know that there is a running back outside of Love that I'm taking in the first round. I think that, 201 is probably the spot, maybe 112. But again, early second is where I'm looking for most of these guys in this tier. So like I mentioned at the top of the show, I don't have a tier 2. So there is no player in tier 2 in this class. I have 3 guys in tier 3, and that's where Jonah Coleman fits in. So it's rough. It's really rough at running back. I think we're missing just a huge group of guys that might typically slot in as second and third round players, and we just don't really have that in this class. So my running back 3 is Emmett Johnson, running back out of Nebraska. We'll talk about another guy from Notre Dame in a minute, in Jeremiyah Price. But Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska, projected fourth round pick, early fourth, is someone, he's 22 and a half years old, 5'10", 202 pounds. So a little bit undersized. 202 is a bit on the light side, 85.6 PFF grade. And what really draws my attention to Emmett Johnson, 2 different things. Number 1, he's a big-time pass catcher, but number 2, he carried a huge workload in his final year at Nebraska. Now, didn't do a ton leading up to this past year, but in 2025, he had 251 carries for 1,451 yards, 12 touchdowns. He had 46 receptions for 370 yards and 3 more touchdowns. So this is somebody where if you're talking about a guy that's going, in the border of the third and fourth round, somewhere in that range, he's going to end up in a committee at best. You're not just going to be getting a guy in the third or fourth round of the NFL draft that immediately takes over as a starter in most cases. And Johnson has an elite trait, and that's as a pass catcher. So he can work his way into an offense, whether that's in a third round role, 2-minute drill, splitting out wide as a slot receiver, something like that. And Emmett Johnson can do it. So he had some nice volume as a pass catcher throughout his career at Nebraska. And I am going to be drawn to that. We've seen year after year that the players that catch the ball in college have a better chance at success in the NFL. And so he had a huge workload. So he showed that he can carry that load for the course of an entire season, and he catches the ball. So is he the best runner? I don't know. I've seen some mixed reviews. It's, hey, the stats maybe feel a little overinflated, but at the same time, playing in a program like Nebraska in the Big Ten, playing good defenses, to churn out that kind of production is always going to be a positive sign. The PFF grade was nice at 85.6. So there's enough there that I am interested, and it just is going to be up to the NFL to tell us what they think. All right, so at number 4 in my rankings, we'll talk about the other Notre Dame running back, Jeremiyah Price, and he is currently projected to be a second-round pick in the NFL draft. So if that happens, he will almost certainly jump from 4 to 2 in my rankings. Now, that's obviously because draft capital is extremely important, especially for running back. The split, even among the second and third round players, is a pretty big difference. So going in the second round is a big deal. So we're going to be very much paying attention to that storyline in the draft. And he is 22 and a half years old, 5'11", 203 pounds. So again, a little bit underweight. In fact, a decent amount underweight compared to what he was listed at Notre Dame by about 7 to 10 pounds. At Notre Dame this past year, 113 carries, 674 yards, 11 touchdowns. He also caught 6 passes for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. PFF grade was 78.6. And There's a few things here. Number one, the big, elephant in the room is, well, he wasn't even his team's starting running back. He was behind Jeremiyah Love. Now, at the same time, Jeremiyah Love is an obvious stud running back, the clear best player at the position in this draft, one of the top players overall in the entire draft, regardless of position. So it makes sense that, hey, if you have somebody like Jeremiyah Love on your team, you're going to give him the ball. And that's what Notre Dame did. So Jarian Price definitely made the most of his opportunities. He was a very efficient player. 11 touchdowns is still great. But the other big question for him, besides can he handle a starter workload, is can he catch the ball? He only had 6 catches this past year. He doesn't really have a big track record of receiving work at Notre Dame. He also had a big Achilles injury early on in his career at Notre Dame that he worked his way back from. So there's a little bit of injury history concern there for me. Guys that have torn their Achilles, even in the NFL, it is a struggle for those players to really fully regain form or to end up as elite players. So I do worry whether or not he can handle a full starter workload in the NFL, but he was efficient. He obviously played on a good team, and even with Jeremiyah Love, he was still talented enough to get a decent workload. 113 carries. He held, Jeremiyah Love had 199. So compared to somebody like Emmett Johnson, who had 251 carries, there is a solid, that is a solid cut into Love's workload. So Price is somebody that the NFL seems to like more than I do for fantasy. And it's just something where if he does truly go second round, I'm not going to have much of a choice but to bump him up because it means a team is going to give him the ball. So lots of rumblings about, he'd be a good fit in Seattle. I've seen some crazy stuff like him going at the end of the first round. That to me seems absolutely nuts, but I guess, teams have made crazier picks in the past. So if the NFL truly does view him as an early second round player or even a mid second round player, it's not all that far off from pick number 32 where Seattle is, spotted right now. So we'll see. It'd be good for fantasy, of course, if he can go higher. I just would be surprised to see a team spend a late first or early second on a player that was not a starter on his own team, had a major injury, and did not show any receiving work in college. So not that he can't do it. It could be a situation where he just didn't get the opportunity, given that they had Jeremiyah Love, who was a better pass catcher. So, we'll see. Price was kind of billed as more of the power back between the two, but he actually ends up being smaller than Jeremiyah Love, which is pretty interesting. But, he did kind of fill that role a bit in college. So, he does play with some power that maybe he doesn't, that doesn't show up on paper with his size. He had an okay combine as well, so he does have some speed. But Jadarian Price is my number 4 running back. At number 5, we have the true NFL Combine darling, and that's Mike Washington Jr. out of Arkansas, currently projected to be a 3rd-round pick. And all of our projected draft capital is from NFL Mock Draft Database, which takes like hundreds and thousands of NFL mock drafts and puts them all together. We get a big consensus, big board. So Mike Washington Jr., 3rd-round pick at the moment, 22.8 years old. He's 6'1", 223 pounds, 78.3 PFF grade. Last year at Arkansas, 167 carries, 1,070 yards, 8 touchdowns. He also caught 28 passes for 226 yards and 1 touchdown. So Mike Washington Jr. is interesting. He's bounced around a bit in his college career, played at some smaller schools, ended up over at Arkansas, where he then broke out with a huge senior season. So pretty efficient, good numbers, and he had a crazy NFL Combine that we talked about at length about a month ago on this show, where we went over our Combine winners and losers. He had a 4.3 speed, and at his size, 6'1", 223, that's a big-time number. So guys that are big and strong and fast and can catch the ball tend to have the highest upside in fantasy football. So Mike Washington Jr. certainly fits into that mold. I don't know that he is necessarily that talented as a runner. I didn't necessarily come away after seeing him feeling like he was some all-star running back, But, he has solid numbers. And obviously the athleticism is something that's going to be important to pay attention to. It will likely bump up his draft capital. So it's important not to double count it. But because of the size-speed combo, that has a very good possibility of pushing him into the third round on day 2, which would be very helpful for fantasy football. It's certainly something that could push him up a spot or 2 if guys like Coleman and Johnson don't go on day 2. So remains to be seen. It wouldn't stun me if he bumped his way all the way up to number 3 in the rankings. But it's just something where, again, he's not a player that I'm looking to take in the top 12 of a rookie draft. I think this is somebody that in the early to mid second, you feel perfectly fine taking a shot on. But using a first round pick on somebody like Mike Washington is not something that I'm really looking to do. So Mike Washington Jr. at number 5. At number 6, we have another power, speed combo guy, and that's Nick Singleton at Penn State. So 2 Penn State running backs in this class, and spoiler alert, we have them back to back. So we'll talk about Kaytron Allen in a minute. But Nick Singleton projected to be a 4th round pick at the moment, late 4th, and he is 22.3 years old, 6 foot, 219 pounds, and 77.6 PFF grade, so a little bit lower. Last year at Penn State, had a pretty down year. 123 carries, 549 yards, 13 touchdowns though, 24 receptions for 219 yards and 1 more touchdown. So Nick Singleton was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school. He played all 4 years as a starter at Penn State. Almost came out last year, which in hindsight maybe would have been better for his draft stock. But the class was loaded. Figured, hey, I can have the chance to be the number 2 guy in 2026. And, well, things did not go very well. Penn State, of course, was a train wreck this past year. And Singleton was included in that. He struggled. He, lost some of his work to Kaytron Allen. It was a situation where the 2 of them have essentially been co-starters for 4 years. And once the new coaching staff took over after James Franklin was fired, they shifted more to playing Kaytron Allen over Singleton. So that is interesting to me. It's something that is giving me a little bit of pause about having Singleton ahead of Allen right now, because it seems like the coaching staff did favor Allen. But it's just something, again, about the receiving work, the power, speed, pass catching combination of skills is something that the NFL really values. Those players tend to do well. And if you're going to get big time production for a fantasy football running back, it's usually somebody that is big and strong, very fast, and can catch the ball. And so Nick Singleton does that. The downside to Singleton is that I think he struggles a bit as a runner. He does not have very good vision. He is someone that may be more of a pure athlete than he is an actual running back, which I think you can see if you watch some of his games. He has some big moments and nice plays and has decent, statistics. In fact, he and Kaytron Allen both, go down in the record books as 2 of the most productive running backs in Penn State history, which is certainly saying something. But they did play there all 4 years, and I think Singleton just never really got better. He came onto the scene early, was an awesome player as a freshman, sophomore, but he just never really took the next step into being a truly elite college running back. And so I think there will be a team that takes a shot on him probably early on day 3, but we just haven't really seen him develop. So it'll be up to the NFL team that takes him to help push him into that type of player. Now, currently, he hasn't been able to test or do any drills, etc. He did break it. He broke his foot at the Senior Bowl, so that was a bummer. He hasn't been able to do anything so far this spring. So it'll probably be a few months yet till he's back on the field, and that will likely impact his draft capital. So could Nick Singleton fall into the 5th or 6th round? Absolutely. But at the moment, currently projected to go in the 4th round. All right, so at number 7 is Kaytron Allen, the other Penn State running back, currently projected to be a 5th round pick. He is 23.3 years old, 5'11", 216 pounds, so a touch smaller than Nick Singleton, but not by much. He was graded much much higher by PFF this past year, 89.5. He had 210 carries for 1,303 yards, 15 touchdowns. He also had 18 receptions for 68 yards. So definitely a much, much better statistical year for Kaytron Allen than Nick Singleton. He is a little bit older. He doesn't have quite the same athleticism as Singleton, but I think Kaytron Allen to me is just a very good, solid committee running back that doesn't necessarily do anything extremely well or elite, but he is just good across the board. He can get the job done. He has a lot of experience. He got on the field early. So it's a guy that if you're looking for a solid number 2 running back on your NFL team, hey, if you want to take him in the 4th, 5th round, I think it's perfectly fine. There are a number of teams that I think could use a solid, steady running back in their committees or to back up their, stud running backs. So Kaytron Allen to me just fits that mold. Solid player. Now I don't know that he's got the speed or the athleticism to turn into a big time fantasy asset. But he's somebody that if he got the opportunity to get a full workload, he could be solid. He'd be fine enough. He'd put up fantasy points for you if he got some spot starts. But it's just one of those things where he's not going to be efficient enough to where he can do anything for you without the heavy volume. So that's just the way I see him. But very productive player. The offense really ran through him this past year, despite it being a very down year for the Nittany Lions. But he is good enough here to check in at number 7 and is at least somebody on my board that I'm interested in taking. And he is actually the final player in tier 4 of my running back. So I believe I skipped out on mentioning those tiers. So I want to regroup on that. Tier 2, again, had nobody in it. Jeremiyah Love was in tier 1, nobody in tier 2. Tier 3, I have Coleman, Johnson, and Price, whereas in tier 4, I have Washington, Singleton, and Allen. So that can and probably will change post NFL draft. I would imagine Washington will have a chance to bump up into tier 3 with the draft capital. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But solidly in that 4th tier of guys that I'm looking at, probably in the late 2nd round of your rookie drafts, I think is where these 2 players, Singleton and Allen, fit in. And that's where I would be looking to take a shot on them. All right, so now we move on to my running back 8, which is the start of tier 5, which has 4 players in it. And this is where my interest in the running backs pretty much drops off a cliff. We go from guys that could go in the 4th round, maybe 5th, to all of a sudden we're talking 5th, 6th, 7th round guys. There's really no shot of any of these guys going in the 4th or better the way I see it. Of course, that could certainly happen, but from a fantasy football perspective, these are all 3rd and 4th round rookie picks, best case scenario. A lot of these guys, more like late 3rd to 4th round rookie picks. And we'll start with number 8, Damon Claiborne out of Wake Forest. He is a projected 5th round pick, late 5th round, 22 and a half years old, 5'10", 188 pounds, so definitely undersized. He had a 68.6 PFF grade, and last year at Wake Forest, 179 carries, 907 yards, 10 touchdowns. He also caught 28 passes for 140 yards. So, Claiborne is someone, to me, that is more of a complementary piece in an offense. He has some pass-catching ability. He's quick, and given that he is only 188 pounds, you obviously need to have some speed there to be successful. But he does have some speed. So I think he has a role on an NFL offense, but it's more of a pass-catching, gadgety, 2-minute drill type of player. I don't think this is someone that is going to be able to handle a full, workhorse level of volume in the NFL. And, even last year, 179 carries, good, but not elite. So, but again, there are a number of these players in this draft class that, didn't break 200 carries. So things are changing a bit with the running back position. There are just more of those committees and players that aren't getting the massive workloads. But I don't know if he can hold up at the NFL level, but he definitely has a role on a team. He could be an RB2, an RB3 for an NFL team, give you some spike weeks in fantasy football if opportunity comes. But that, to me, is kind of the extent of his NFL value. So Damon Claiborne checks in at number 8. At number 9 is Kentucky's Seth McGowan. And he is currently projected to be a 6th-round pick, 24.8 years old, so definitely older. And it's to the point where there's a number of these guys that are older that on tape or with their numbers look solid, but the age is really, really hard to get over for Dynasty because you're entering the league at almost 25, and that is, for some running backs, that's already end of the first contract age. So they're really one contract NFL players. So that's something to keep in mind. But he's got good size, 6 foot, 223 pounds, pretty similar to Mike Washington. And he had a 70.1 PFF grade, 165 carries for 725 yards and 12 touchdowns, 19 carries, 126 yards last year at Kentucky. He also, of course, with his age, has bounced around quite a bit throughout his college career, a few transfers, played at some smaller schools before ending up at Kentucky. And he is a solid runner. He definitely has a good nose for the end zone, can catch the ball a little bit. He's a big, powerful running back with, decent size speed combo, but he's not an electric athlete. He's not going to blow you away. And I think, again, you're probably talking backup rotational type player in the NFL, but somebody that I think is reliable enough that for, that one contract, as long as you're taking him late on day 3, you're not really worried about, hey, is this somebody we're going to sign to a big extension, et cetera. It's more of, hey, can you get 2 to 4 years of usable, backup production out of this guy? And I think he fits into that role. So Seth McGowan at number 9. At number 10, I'm going to go with Eli Heidenreich, running back / wide receiver from Navy. And he's currently projected to be a 7th-round pick. And it wouldn't shock me if he goes a little bit higher than that. But he's 22.7 years old, 6 foot, 198 pounds, had a 4.4 40-yard dash. And this is a guy that is a very, very, a very, very poor man's version of Christian McCaffrey. He is more of a pass-catching weapon than he is a true running back. And Navy, of course, runs a very unique offensive system. And at Navy this past year, 77 carries for 499 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he had 51 catches for 941 yards and 6 more touchdowns. He had a PFF grade of 93.0, so did his job very well. He is an electric weapon out of the backfield in the passing game, and he gives you some rushing production with it. So decent size. He could be a little bit heavier. That would be nice to see if he could be more like 205. But, hey, solid production, good speed, and, given that he played at Navy, one would have to imagine that he would be somebody that has a good work ethic and, high character. So somebody that an NFL team will be happy to add to their running back room, even if he ends up being more of a special teams player. The pass catching upside, we mentioned it with some of those other guys at the top. It's pretty much the entire reason that guys like Jonah Coleman and Emmett Johnson are above Jadarian Price for me, is the fact that they have a lot of pass catching experience. So Heidenreich, hey, as a 3rd or 4th round flyer in your rookie draft, could be worth something. And he's intriguing to me. So I think because of the upside, he is higher up in my rankings compared to a couple of these other names. Where, hey, they might have been better pure running backs, but in terms of their actual upside for fantasy, Heidenreich is somebody that is going to be on my board. At number 11, I have Kalen Black out of Indiana, the defending champion Indiana Hoosiers, projected to be a 6th-round pick, 24.4 years old, 5'9", 208 pounds, 83.7 PFF grade. He had 186 carries for 1,040 yards, 10 touchdowns. He also caught 4 passes for 36 yards this past year. So Kalen Black is someone that I watched every single game of, given that I am an Indiana grad. So, Kalen Black, Roman Hemby, Fernando Mendoza, Omar Cooper, Elijah Surratt, a lot of big names from the Indiana offense in this draft class. I've paid attention to all of them at quite a close level. So, Kalen Black, despite not getting an NFL Combine invite, I do think will be drafted. I do think that he is a better running back than Roman Hemby, his teammate, even though Hemby was more of the starter on the team. But they had very comparable workloads. Both backs had over 1,000 yards, but Black is somebody to me that was more explosive. He was somebody that was great inside the red zone. He could break out some of those longer runs better than Hemby could. So I am very much intrigued by Kalen Black and his fit in the NFL. The age, though, is a huge concern. He's not likely to be very fantasy relevant per se. I think he's one of those guys that might just stick around in the NFL and be a valuable backup. And then the pass catching, we talked about how for other guys that's a huge bonus. For him, it's a huge negative because we just don't have much of a history with him catching the ball. Now, he did more of it at James Madison before transferring to Indiana, so he can do it. He didn't do a lot of it at IU. And in fairness, even Roman Hemby, who is a much, much better pass catcher and has a huge history of doing it at Maryland, even he only had 17 catches last year. So it's just something where you have Mendoza, you have elite wide receivers in Surratt and Cooper, Charlie Becker. You're going to use those receivers more than your running backs. You didn't have to dump the ball off that much with this IU offense. So Kalen Black is an interesting name that I think will go at some point on day 3 and is a fourth-round rookie pick in your rookie drafts. Now, at number 12, I'm going to go with Adam Randall out of Clemson. Converted wide receiver, and he's projected currently to go in the 5th round. 21.7 years old, so a little bit younger, so we do like that. 6'3", 232 pounds. So huge running back. Those would be big numbers for a wide receiver. But here he is at running back, 72.5 PFF grade. Last year at Clemson, in his only year as a running back, 168 carries for 814 yards and 10 touchdowns. He also caught 36 passes for 254 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Randall, is someone that I could see bumping up a few slots in this ranking if he gets some solid draft capital, because he does have some interesting things. He's young, he's under 22. He's got crazy size. He's got some good speed, and he can catch the ball, given that he's a former wide receiver. He did have 36 catches last year. So while he struggles as an actual runner, again, the things that score you fantasy points, he can do in terms of pass catching and finding the end zone. So he's intriguing enough to me that I could see him bump up, probably as high as 8 or 9 in my rankings. But I'm a little skeptical of these guys that don't really know how to play the position, but they're just good athletes for college and they switch over to get the ball. And it's fine. It shows there's some talent and some skill because you wanted to get those players the ball more. But I'm worried about Randall's ability to do it in the NFL and do it well. So could be somebody that's worth a flyer. I think certainly it's going to be one of those boomer bust type of picks. I don't think there's much of a middle ground here. He's either going to end up with a nice role or he's going to just be a complete bust and out of the NFL in 2 or 3 years. So we'll see what happens with him. But Adam Randall out of Clemson checks in at number 12. At number 13, I'm going to go with Jamari Taylor out of Virginia. Projected 6th round pick, 24 years old, 5'10", 199 pounds, so a little bit light, 76.1 PFF grade, and last year at Virginia, 222 yards, 222 carries for 1,062 yards, 14 touchdowns, 43 receptions for 253 yards and a touchdown. So another one of these guys that can catch the ball, has a good history as a pass catcher, and he had a huge workload this past year at Virginia. So productive player, a little bit undersized, but somebody that got a ton of volume. And again, pass catching is so important for these running backs, and he did that. He did transfer up, I believe it was North Carolina Central, where he played for 3 years. So small school guy that transferred up for a year to Virginia and continued his strong play. So we do like that. but a little bit skeptical given the size, the age. It's something where if he can get the draft capital again, like a number of these players, could end up in a backup scenario where if he can get some volume, he can give you some value. But we're talking 4th round rookie pick more than likely. So Jamari Taylor at number 13 out of Virginia. Our final running back in my rankings, checking in at number 14, as I mentioned him earlier, Roman Hemby out of Indiana, projected to be a 6th round pick, 23.6 years old, 6 foot, 207 pounds, 80.9 PFF grade. Last year at IU, 230 carries for 1,120 yards, 7 touchdowns. He also caught 17 passes for 165 yards. And Hemby is a good enough runner, but he's a very good pass catcher. So he transferred after several years over at Maryland, where he was a highly productive running back, especially in the passing game. We're talking 30, 40 receptions a year type of player. So definitely can, catch the ball, do nice things with the ball in his hand. And so that is something that is going to help him get a roster spot. But I do worry that he ends up more of an RB3 on a team, more of a special teams type guy. He can probably return some kicks and do situational, passing down work in the NFL. But I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to do a whole lot in terms of running the ball in the NFL. He was never a guy that would give you, huge breakout runs. It was more of he'd get what the offensive line was able to create, which is good. He doesn't have poor vision, comparatively to a Nick Singleton, where maybe could have gotten more, but he's not going to give you anything extra. So I don't know if he's necessarily got the juice for the NFL, but productive player in college that it's good enough to at least get him on the board as a potential 4th round rookie pick. But given the overall lack of strength in this class, there's a lot of names on this list that are worth mentioning on a show like this because they will likely be drafted and they will likely go in the 3rd or 4th round of your rookie drafts. But unlike most years where I'm inclined to just target running backs in those late rounds, I might take a few extra wide receivers this year. It's just something where so many of these running backs are not that exciting that I'm going to be more inclined to take a shot on the wide receiver class, which is much, much, much more interesting. And that's why we're going to talk about them next week on our final show before the NFL draft. So we have made it through our running backs. We've made it through our quarterbacks and tight ends. And next week is, the grand finale of sorts prior to the NFL draft, where we will talk about this awesome wide receiver class that is much more exciting. So we have a lot of big names. I will very easily probably be able to come up with 20 plus names that will be fantasy relevant. We won't have time, of course, to go over every single one the way we did today, but we will have quite a good time looking over those names. It'll be a much more exciting conversation about some of those players where we're going to have a lot of 2nd, 3rd, 4th round wide receivers as opposed to a lot of these 5th and 6th round running backs. So we'll be happy to dive into those guys and share all that info with you next week. So that's it for today's show. Thank you all very much for tuning in as we discuss the 2026 rookie running back class. This is the Dynasty War Room Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we will talk to you all next week.